are so many feelings at the IEP table. In fact, sometimes our feelings are so big that we can lose sight of why we're even there. Welcome to the Special Education Inner Circle podcast. I'm your host, Catherine Witcher, and I brought with me today Janice, who is a person that you need to know. You need to hear her story, learn from her experience, and we're going to dive right in. Janice, thank you for being here today.
Oh, I'm really glad. Thanks, Catherine. I'm looking forward to it.
All right. So tell us, how did you end up at an IEP table?
Yes. Well, I must tell you that when our son Micah was maybe 3 or 4 or 5, I'm not sure, we were at a table. I did not even know it was an IEP meeting. It was just a meeting to support his growth. And, I can remember sitting at that little table and the little chairs and having no idea what was going on. And I was a social worker. So I sort of knew systems and services, but I didn't know. And in part, I didn't know because I still was learning what this all meant. And so Micah, who is now 37 years old, I used to be 37. He is really, and our daughter Emma, who's 4 years younger, have really been the people who've taken me into the world of disability and inclusion and social justice issues.
Yeah. So my brother is 44 with Down syndrome. Your son is 37. And I tell people all the time that really was the very, very beginning of special education. Micah falls into that kind of first generation of fully educated adults with disabilities now. So they made it all the way through, services started, when they're young and they can go through. And that wasn't always the case for generations before them. So we, kind of have this experience of seeing things change, but not change so much. And so I love that you have some books out. So tell everybody just kind of what your message is. I know, let me just preface this for a minute so our listeners know. You guys, I've got 2 master IEP coaches that did a book study on one of Janice's books talking about parents and professionals collaborating. And they said, you need to get Janice out to our community because they need to hear what she has to say. So there we go. Let's go from there. Tell us about that book that you took this experience and kind of put it together.
Sure. Well, I must tell you that in a general sense, when Michael was, I knew that our life was going to be a bit different than a lot of my peers. I knew that there would be challenges. I really didn't know exactly what those challenges were. What I didn't anticipate is that the relationship with so many of the professionals who came into our life, that relationship would be challenging at times, sometimes more challenging than having the child with a disability. And that hit me like, a ton of bricks, because I was a social worker and had been on one side of that partnership. And now I was on in a different partnership. And so I remember going literally to the dictionary and looking up the word partner. And one of the definitions said 2 or more people dancing together. And I thought, it is a dance. And so that sort of has been my metaphor, my falling back on to try to understand, what complicates this. And, one of the things that I talk about, I'll just talk maybe 2 of the differences, is that it hit me. I didn't choose to be at this relationship. And the professionals on their good days, maybe not Friday afternoon, have made a very conscious choice to be there, not always to be with the families, but to be with the kids. And that impacts this dance, because many times professionals are very eagerly awaiting their new dance partner. Come on in, I've got resources, and I know about these labels, and I've got new games. And so there's this wanting. And we as parents who have often not chosen to be at this dance in this relationship, it's like our backs are turned to them and we're not so eager to get on that dance floor. Yeah. So I found that insight and shared it with other people. I thought it was just me. And then I said it to the, it's sort of to the world.
I can tell you it's not you. We have, yeah. I post this out on social media quite a bit. I have a quote that I put out there and I reframe it sometimes, but the concept is, Parents did not choose to be at the IEP table. Parents did not go to school to be at the IEP table. Professionals, you have to remember, you chose a career that requires you to sit at this table. And whenever I post that, it gets shared and liked and out there. And it's amazing to me how many people don't think of that when you go into that room. And you know what? I didn't think of it when I was a teacher. I was not thinking about that. But I will tell you, there's a line that I always encouraged my clients to say. So there was a time where I worked one-on-ones with families, and they would at the IEP table say, you know, what we really want. And I would say, you have to framework that. It's not what you want, because you wish you weren't sitting at this table, because we don't choose to sit at this hard table right here. What your child needs is different than what you want. And that communication is so important to differentiate that. So, okay, so we've got the dance.
Yeah, the choice, right. Yes. Thank you for putting that out there. I think the other thing, and you so beautifully began this podcast with this, is this, I recognize, and partly because I'm a social worker and my own sort of nature is that feelings are a very important aspect to everything, to parenting, to being a human being. And in fact, in one of my articles, I referred to, when I'm talking about feelings, I refer to feelings as the F word. Nobody wants to deal with it, right? And not every teacher, educator is going to be comfortable, but nobody was willing to allow me to have the range of emotions or validate. In part, just saying, this must be hard, Janice, or, what keeps you up in the middle of the night? Or, I mean, that aspect of the dance is very real. And I think one of the things I've learned over time is that lots of times when people think you have to validate their feelings, that they have to do something to make it better. And lots of times the gift is being able to say, I can see how hard you're working as a parent or as a teacher, and it must be troubling not to get the result that, everybody wants to have happen. And just
I want to encourage everybody right there, like put a reminder in your phone, make yourself a little sticky note that you have to reach out to somebody on your IEP team and tell them that you see them. Like, we all need that. So this is a great reminder for you guys to take action. And it's not at the next IEP meeting. It's today. Just go tell them, I see what you did. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. When Micah graduated, if you will, from high school, we invited all the people that he had been in contact with, and honored the work that they did. So Yes, absolutely. So that's how I use the dance. And in my work, the book that I co-authored with two other people is, A Dance That Matters, or actually the first part is Parents and Professionals Partnering with Children with Disabilities, A Dance That Matters. And so that metaphor has helped me, has helped a lot of other people, and at times we do step on each other's toes. Mostly not intentionally. And just to sort of riff on what you were saying, Catherine, that simple phrase is, hey, I messed up, I'm really sorry. It goes so far. When I remember one particular teacher consultant called us and he had messed up. And I was frustrated, and he left a message on our answering machine, I'm really sorry. I'm not going to do it again. That was, I apologize. And it strengthened the partnership because he showed his vulnerability as well.
That's so hard. It's so hard to admit when you're wrong as a professional, and it's hard to admit when you're wrong as a parent. Also, when you realize like, oh, maybe what I was fighting so hard for is not necessarily the most appropriate, right? We don't use the word best when we're talking about IEPs because the law says we get the most appropriate program in there. So, we're looking for the most appropriate solution. Sometimes when I'm working with a parent and trying to show them different ways, and I'm like, if we can get to an agreed upon desired outcome. So the outcome is we want a child to have friends. That's a desired outcome. The way we get there can vary. So you as a social worker, you're going to see that one way. The teacher is going to see it another way. The parent's going to see it another way. And so I always say it's not our job as parents on kind of this side of the table to always figure out the perfect path, but it is important for us to find out what the destination is. And then we can use the experts to help do that. I have a question for you, being in the chaos. So we don't talk a whole lot about all the things that are happening, like in the world, in the news, and all of that. But we do have this overwhelming feeling of devastation, of failure, of not being able to keep up in special education right now because of everything that has happened. So when we started this podcast, we talked about feelings. And I think it would be great to hear from you, maybe some words of encouragement or some strategies of, if you have a teacher or a parent that are sitting feeling like they're not doing enough or they're failing, and we have the heaviness of everything that has happened, where do they start in kind of picking themselves up and moving forward? Because it's not as easy as it was before.
Yeah, you're right. Well, there's a phrase that popped into my head: don't deny our despair. I mean, there are moments when you just have to sit with it. It's real. I mean, if we didn't feel some of that heaviness, I would really begin to question our sense of reality. So sometimes we just have to sit with it and hold it. And that's not easy to do because we want to quickly make it go away. And going back to the validation, when we find a friend or a neighbor or colleague who could say, this sucks, this is harder than anything I've ever been through, there's that camaraderie, that mirroring as well. How do we then move? So it's not that we turn our back on it, we sort of bring it along, but we begin to move. And then a story comes to mind. Our daughter, as I mentioned earlier, Emma, is a principal in Boston schools. And so she's in the thick of it, as many people are, right? And, the staff is doing their best and they're overwhelmed. They can't quite do everything they want to do. And she decided spontaneously that she would walk up and down the halls asking the kids a simple question: what are you most proud of that happened today? Oh, and the kids zoned in on, I played the violin, a new song, or I used the color red for the first time, or, whatever it was. And at the end of like 40 minutes, she had collected all these different moments of joy, really, and then shared it with the teachers. And so what she did was, sort of shift the focus on, let's look what is working, and it doesn't have to all be academics. That's I think, my own sort of thinking. I mean, we want to strengthen the ability of young people to strengthen their relationships, to be able to talk about the uncomfortable things, and be comfortable with that. So, those are some of the ideas I think that are, and I think we have to be nice to each other when we can. I mean, again, I fall back on Emma because her stories are more fresh, but like she makes, does a waffle breakfast making for the staff, once a week. So whatever we can do is critical. But to deny the feelings and pretend like they don't exist, or to sit in them for a long time, is not going to be helpful to anybody. So
I'm going to add something in there too, where I've got the whole, feel the feelings, and that's hard. And I have struggled with that myself in the past, where it's just like, but it hurts to feel it. Like, why would I want to feel this? Because you have to feel it a lot of times to get through it and to get some clarity on what you need to do next. And then the saying thank you and being nice to others, but we have to be nice to ourselves too. And a lot of times it's not just that you're being hard on yourself. I'm seeing a lot of parents and teachers be truly unkind, or what we would call mean to somebody else. If they were doing that to somebody else, we'd be like, that's really mean. And they're doing it to themselves every day. They are beating themselves up over, and they're just not being kind to themselves. Do you have suggestions on, from your social work perspective? I don't like the word and this whole trend of self-care. I'm like, a bubble bath isn't going to solve it, guys. Like a new manicure, maybe that's fun, but that's not what it is. What are some things that when you have that negative self-talk, especially in our disability community and our teachers and our parents that are carrying around this heavy load, siloed. What's some of that? How do we flip that around?
Yeah, I struggle with that word self-care too. Who knows? I did hear that we need to think of it more as community care. That, self-care often is like one more thing to do, right? And so there's something in that. I'm not quite sure all what, but I think it's that connecting with other people, that we're not alone, that people have, have found their resilience in community with others. The bubble bath won't make it. However, I think, but there's nothing wrong with that as
no,
well.
like take the bubble bath, but it's not going to solve it.
It's not going to solve. Right. And we're in it, we're in it for the long run. And so biting off smaller bites, taking what's the next step, Václav Havel, the poet and former Czech president, talked about hope. Is we to have hope doesn't mean that we'll achieve what we want, but hope is a sense that the next step we take is the right step, regardless of where it takes us. So is Micah going to be able? I mean, when Micah decided, as many kids did, that he wanted to go to college, kids with low IQs back then didn't go to college. We had to take one step at a time and meet with other people. So I think back in setting more realistic expectations of what we can do. And I will say the other thing is being in nature. And you don't have to be in the middle of the woods. It's taking a walk around the block, look at one tree, look at the sky. I mean, there's something in there that is teaching us something, and that fresh air, even though there might be some smoke in the air, it's healing for the soul. So those are a couple of mixture of mashes.
I love it because that's gonna touch on so many different people who are listening. It's interesting that you've said community a few times, because we're actually in the process right now of our Master IEP Coach Mentorship Conference, and we're doing it virtually right now. We have an in-person one in the summer, but in winter it's virtual. And we had our first day yesterday, and we had 100 people in our community show up virtually, and a teacher put into the chat box, "I could cry because I'm so happy to see all of the faces of the people who understand her." Yeah. And I got chills, and I was like, that's community. That's the power of it. So I'm going to encourage all of our listeners, if you don't have a community, I want you to reach out. I want you to go over to masteriepcoach.com and find that community. I'm going to make sure that all the links to Janice's website and her books and all of the resources that you need from Janice, we're going to have links for that in the show notes. And remember, if you are listening to this on Apple Podcasts, please leave a 5-star review. Every time you leave a review, it helps more parents and teachers find the help that they need to help build IEPs that work in the real world. And of course, connect with our experts like Janice. Janice, thank you for being here today.
Oh, thank you. Thanks. And I'm so glad you emphasized the idea of help, because one of the messages that I really encourage people is to learn how to ask for help, not with apology, but with dignity and grace. And when we ask for help, that's what really builds the community. That's what builds the interdependence, not independence.
I love that. So I'm going to leave it right there. You guys need to hit replay. You guys need to play that over and remind yourselves. Janice, that was beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Catherine.